did it. So what happened? What happened was,
So this is like a philosophy that centers around consciousness instead of matter. Like, most of us kind of think of reality as being composed of particles and forces and matter, material things, right? And this particular philosophy kind of starts with awareness as the thing, the base of reality. Matter remains in this model. It's just matter is only comprehended through consciousness. So what he's done, this map of 5 elements, is all the different ways that consciousness can articulate itself. So there's like stages of consciousness, there's different states of consciousness, there's different types of expression in consciousness, there's lines of development in consciousness. So all these elements are things that change the nature of consciousness to where the reality that you perceive actually changes. So in certain states of consciousness, you'll be in a different reality will seem different to you.
forget the 5 thing.
Well, I'm assuming that's like
You're starting Mortal Kombat at Goro if you're starting at this 5 thing. The 5 thing is he's been doing this. He's been Ken Wilber is the founder, flagship guy of this whole theory thing. Over the years, there have been 5 shifts in his theory.
Okay.
That some people getting in too deep right away are like, oh, he contradicts himself. Like, why would I pay attention to this? He's like contradicting himself. He's sharpening the point over these 5 shifts, and Adam went really quickly over that.
Yeah.
Realistically, Adam, do you have the background with all the charts and labels? Could you put that background on for a second?
Oh boy, let's see if I can share my Pornhub account with you guys. Okay, so
these are the lines and quadrants. This is what he's talking about.
This is like a rainbowy map that I kind of drew this, but it's a common. It's pretty similar to a lot of other maps that exist.
Which one are you trying to point to? All of them?
I was just trying to get out of the way. So Wilber 1 is states. So in Wilber's early work, he's just looking at states of consciousness. States of consciousness can include any, drunkenness, sobriety, tripping. So states of intoxication, happy, depressed, normal. Those are states. So any change to your physical, biological, mental, if you're excited, if you're traumatized, states of consciousness.
These are brain chemicals at work.
Yeah.
Brain chemicals processing sensory information, and it results in kind of different ways of seeing the world. And what he found is he was really into Eastern spirituality, Taoism, Zen Buddhism, and Indian practices, and started to find that if you look across all these different traditions, and this includes Western as well, but it's just not as pronounced, like Gnosticism and things like that. These Eastern practices, they really make this methodology, like where you're studying under your Miyagi or whatever in your temple, and you go through a process of recognizable transitions to your baseline state of consciousness, like the way you are throughout the day. And so those go from what we experience now with no training is called gross level or gross body consciousness. It's just processing sensory information, interacting with other personalities, being in the world. And as they practice meditation, they learn these new states, which start out as states, temporary, fleeting glimpses into something transcendent. And those can be solidified into stages or long-term sort of growth levels, so that a person, instead of just accessing this state in meditation, will actually internalize it so that it's their actual character. It's like who they are. And that goes through psychic, subtle, causal, and non-dual. So these are stages that people don't really talk about this a lot, but when they talk about spirituality, they're usually referring to the process of accessing one of these states, usually psychic or one of the low ones. And if they were to continue in that practice, go a long ways, study with someone that would probably move through these structures, these states of consciousness. So that's really important to the work, and that's not unique to Ken Wilber at all. There's a lot of authors and philosophers. This is kind of the whole field of New Age, is like, what are states of consciousness? Are they real? How do you access them? What is the meaning of spirituality and spiritual practice that people have done throughout the ages? So reconciling of kind of Eastern and Western modes of thinking.
In an explainable, graphable
way.
Theory type of way. Wilber 1.
Yeah, and we've created a way of communicating across these traditions. Like an atheist can communicate with a Scientologist, with a Vedanta, Hindu practitioner, and if we can use these vocabulary or just recognize the concepts are interrelated across these traditions and cultures, we can have a dialogue that kind of transcends those cultural barriers. So it's a really interesting time in the sense that like spirituality is becoming sort of homogenized or at least generalized to the point where we can recognize that the aims of a lot of different spiritual groups and spiritual practices are fundamentally similar. They're about accessing and maintaining states of consciousness.
So it's pretty, I mean, not straightforward, but kind of straightforward.
Well, cool.
Does it kind of make sense?
It kind of makes sense, yeah.
I think that in the early days, he was kind of thinking of it like if a person is like healthy and well adjusted, they will tend toward this spiritual path ultimately. And this is coming from like if you're familiar with like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have your survival needs, your belongingness needs, your success, achievement, actualization, and transcendence would be kind of at the top. Like once you're kind of wearied of the world, you'll tend toward this sort of spiritual path. That's kind of a conceit of his work, and it's not by following someone, but just by following your own kind of impetus for like novelty. Like where can I go from here? And you recognize states of consciousness, like whatever's happening in this world, whatever I've done or whatever I have, that's not my state of consciousness. So I could be miserable, I could be ignorant, I could be blind with all these things, and
you could be penniless, living in a cardboard box on the street and the happiest person on earth, or you could be a billionaire with all of your wants tended to and be miserable.
Yeah, like emotionally or spiritually penniless. Now, right. I don't imagine. I think that you probably, when you have the stuff, this is the idea of the hierarchy of needs, is like having the stuff. Kind of, you get exhausted of it. You're like, okay, I have that, and you want more, and so the final more is like reality itself. It's like, how can I kind of take possession of what is? How can I fully live in this moment? How can I fully experience the experience of being this person in this world?
Too late did I realize my children are my true treasure.
Sure. That's a big one that happens with people, is recognizing, that the people that you have are more important too. More expressions of consciousness. This had to then be reconciled. Is it true that when you get to a certain level of complexity, you start pursuing spirituality? Or is it true that simple people pursue spirituality, more complex people do not? That's another theory that's out there, So he starts looking at maturity itself, growing up. What do psychologists think about that? There's so many different ways to kind of measure that, but it's sort of taboo today to think of overall stages of development, because that's a hierarchy, and that suggests that someone could be better in this particular way than someone else. Nevertheless, in developmental psychology, there were all these researchers looking at ways to model human development into stages. So like, this child does not comprehend that other people see situations differently. This child does. That's a developmental stage. Like, before you can understand what other people are thinking, you're at a lower stage of development than someone who can. So that would be like down here, magenta to red meme. That's like a low stage movement.
Other side.
So each of these stages will correspond to those, stages in early childhood development from all over psychology, Freud, Maslow, Jung, and these particular ones, philosophers and psychologists, Gebser and Keegan, Lovinger and Gilligan. So all these researchers that construct stage models, they find the same general pattern, and they're studying different things. They might be studying how you relate to other people. They might be studying how you think. They might be studying your aptitudes.
Stress response.
Same.
Yeah, these are all sciencey stuff, to measure growing up.
It seems like there are sections that you can fall in with blurred lines. They're not straight lines. It is a spectrum.
Absolutely.
But it seems like you could be placed on this map, depending on what you're looking at. And everything you're looking at could be a different place on the map. But there needed to be some sort of map to place, to start whatever you're trying to start. Is it therapy? Is it motivation? Is it what is it? Whatever you're trying to start, you need to start you need to have a map to go by. So that's where our altitudes comes in. Or spiral dynamics was another Wilbur thing, similar but different.
So what he notices is all these people studying development, studying human development, what I think I am, what I think my reality is, what I'm capable of emotionally or conceptually. It arrives at a really similar, like if you just describe what that stage is, and then you take another model and describe what that stage is, there's such incredible overlap. It's clear that they're referring to some sort of core pattern that connects all of these, because the details of each of these nodes are strikingly similar across different lines of development. So what this suggests, in a crazy sense, is like the way that you relate to people, the way that you communicate, the way that you think, your cognitive understanding is mirroring a level of development that civilization has gone through in the past. And
this is my favorite part.
It's mirroring also the stages of development that every human being goes through as they develop, and the cognitive capacities that they develop as they go along. So this is a universalized developmental system for human beings, for consciousness. And what we find is we map these out. We map all these different models that completely independent researchers find these models, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 1 through 100, whatever these models are, set them side by side, link them up according to the things that are pretty intuitively connected, that are pretty samey. Like some people, orange meme is an easy one to kind of draw out.
You're leaning the way you're pointing. Lean the other way.
It's impossible. I'm in a little tiny window and I'm backwards. Orange meme is where a person takes personal responsibility for rationality, and you have to construct your world according to things that you know for sure. So like halfway up this sucker, the developmental spectrum, we become rational beings, and we decide that, proving things with science, with empiricism, with studying numbers and probabilities, that is more certain than any other way of knowing things. So that becomes our dominant level of consciousness. Once we've crossed over to that, there's kind of no going back, because it's intuitively obvious that rationality is more true than myth and legend and magical thinking and instinct.
Start at the bottom and go up to, let's say, Teal, but match it with an example of society, and so you got society, and then an example of an individual.
Yeah. Okay. So the first stage is infrared, and so the stages.
Lean.
I really can't, because I'm going to hurt my back.
There we go.
Okay.
All right.
The third tier stages up here correspond to the states of consciousness, and they're pretty speculative. So when you test people in the world, you get up to about stage 7. You'll find all these stages, according to whatever model you're using. Could be hierarchy of needs. It could be Freudian. It could be spiral dynamics. So
and everything.
You find stage 7 is discovered out here in the world by asking people questions, studying people. You get up to stage 7. So these are the people in the world that you see around you.
Today.
Level 1 is, we're calling it infrared, so it's not quite into the color spectrum yet. It's pre-cultural. It doesn't really have culture. So what you are is Homo sapiens DNA in the world. You have your family, that was apparent, and you're a caveman, essentially, or a field dweller, nomadic.
Neanderthal.
The key distinction of infrared is that you're pre-linguistic. You don't really understand the world in terms of language, because you don't really communicate a lot. You don't have spoken language in prehistory. And so what this corresponds to today would just be babyhood, pretty much. People are bombarding you with language, but you don't understand language yet. Your world is this sort of fusion. It's just like all this stuff happening. You don't really even know who you are. You don't know. You kind of have this sense that you have to make noise to get things. It's really simple.
Self-awareness.
And we outgrow that almost immediately.
So you're just not very self-aware.
Yeah, there's just awareness, not self. Yeah, it's just kind of a primordial.
Survive. Everything's basically new. And in the Paleolithic and pre-Paleolithic times, survive. You need to eat. You need to stay dry and warm. Grunting can kind of get you things. You're in a very tight, probably family group.
Extremely basic.
Survive. But with mating back then, babies don't. I don't think babies mate.
And obviously, like, we don't remember our earliest childhood memories and events that, might just be a brain formation deal. But it could be suggested, too, that, like, the infrared mind doesn't track memory the same way because, as we develop language and culture, we remember things so differently that our memories of archaic consciousness are like foreign to us. Like, we wouldn't even see it now. It wouldn't even make sense how, like, baby Adam saw the world, or if I remembered it, it would be like a damn fever dream. Maybe that's just me kind of tossing something out. The development of Magenta is all about language. You're being bombarded with language. You're learning a language system, and that restructures your mind to see reality as language. So this begets magical thinking. The word is the thing. There's like this sacredness to this mental world of language ideas, and that restructures the way you see reality, because everything you see around you becomes a noun. All the things that happen become verbs, and that's a different way than the infrared way of seeing the world. So in the world, on the planet, we saw people started banding together because they had these language-based villages, and there was a mild redistribution of like power. There was positions of authority, at least in terms of the magical religious structure. There was some sort of leadership,
Yeah.
maybe
I don't
matriarchy,
know, authority
maybe patriarchy,
to an extent, but leaders and
some
mysticism.
sort of collective entity,
Multi-family
so this is where we
groups.
civilize. Okay, and that's characterized by magical thinking. This is why very early peoples, they would do sacrifices. They would do it was very magical
For the river
There was
spirit.
no So, okay. And that's your early childhood. That's your toddlerdom. That's when the world is magical and you're like, well, why are trees there? And like, do eggs come from factories kind of things? You just don't understand anything but what is presented to you. So I call that lore, magical lore.
The people in the time frame and the toddlers.
Yeah.
If they don't know something, rarely will a toddler tell you, I don't know, unless they ate all the cookies, their face is covered in chocolate. They make up something to make sense of the world around them. So Adam's point of how did the tree get there, that a seed got there somehow, it propagated, it grew. If you ask a toddler how the tree got there, you're going to get an hour and a half long story of complete bullshit. Yeah, made up. They had to make sense of the world around them, and so they filled in the blanks with lore.
Okay.
When you level up, you don't leave it. These remain, you stack upon it. It's like a piece of a machine going into a machine, a bigger machine. So like you're always instinct, that never changes. You always start your mind with linguistic connections. That's how we start to form a mind. These levels persist the whole way up. And we can always work on lower levels. We can improve our relationship to instinct and our inner child and all these kind of lower level stuff that today it's not commonplace to be one of these low levels, but those exist within our society and within ourselves, and they're important to recognize and kind of work on. So the next meme, again, we're generally talking about children in today's world, but you can really be an adult at Red Meme at level 3 in today's world. It's feasible. People do it. Red meme is where you've differentiated out your organism body from the environment. That's kind of stage 1 to 2. Now you're really understanding that other people have their own motives and desires. A thing that'll pop out in children is a child before red meme. If they're happy, they think everyone else is happy. They think the whole world is happy. If they're miserable, they think that of everything else. There's no difference between in here and out there as far as like emotions and the mental world. So red meme really understands other mental worlds, and the natural default response to that is to become very selfish. You know how to manipulate others, how to game situations. You're essentially going around demanding things of people, trying to get things from people. So this is the selfish legend. And legend because the way your magical and mythical thinking turns is towards mythologizing yourself, making a legend out of your life. You're exaggerating all your accomplishments, exaggerating all your victimhood. And so there's this big grand story. It's all about me. So this is the kind of narcissistic stage and the terrible twos. And in history, this is when we all formed very warlike. This is Genghis Khan. This is, Alexander the Great. This is like
Alexander the Mediocre.
Big groups of men bashing into each other with sharp edges and shooting flaming spikes at each other. to conquer the world.
universe circled the earth.
Okay.
Yeah, to conquer the world for the chosen people. This is kind of how they see what they're doing, and assured the bloodline goes up to the heavenly realm. Here we're talking about
Magenta in there.
the
go
first
away.
real empires, the first real like religious empires. Ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. So civilization. We're building buildings now, real buildings, real like aqueducts. Things like that. Pretty impressive.
As the scale goes along, the less you kind of need that infrared, because infrared or beige or infancy or just trying to survive in your family group, to having the luxury, just the pure luxurious time to waste thinking about why it's raining. That would lend itself to some of your primal needs are met by the help of the group you're in.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to red, now you have societies. There are philosophers who do nothing but think about why it's fucking raining. But it's a little beside the point. As we get more up, the more needs of the lower levels are kind of automatically met or are much easier to meet.
It's assuming that they're already met. You can't progress further in these
without the needs met.
Without needs.
Yeah, they require a context. You need your cultural context to like force you to each meme is like it's a self-perpetuating system. So they're really hard to start up. You just have some individual that's a weirdo, and then if a bunch of other weirdos are like also weirdos, and it's like, this is really smart, let's found a civilization out of this.
The group sees the benefit of being that weirdo.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got a house that like doesn't burn down or blow over when the big bad wolf comes. Yeah, we probably all should do that. And then in doing so, shapes the society up a little bit, brings everybody up to a common level. Now, there's above and there's below still, but the common level, Rome and stuff like that. Of course, there was still philosophers not philosophers,
Philosophers,
mages and things like that, still trying to tell you that you can't defend the hot gates with your whole army at Christmas.
So now we're into mainstream adulthood. Amber Meme is kind of like you fit in. You can do a corporate thing, you can do a school thing. So what's changed about the person is they not only understand that other perspectives exist, they kind of empathize with them. They kind of go like, okay, so everything that's happening kind of makes sense, and I can assume that it makes sense. And then the selfishness kind of goes down. You become more kind of collectivist. You start looking for like heroes that can kind of bring you into the fold of the status quo. You're just trying to kind of fit in. The mind here has gone from magic mythic to fully mythic. So myths don't need to be religious myths or like Marvel or anything. That's what appeals to this stage. But if they understand science, then they'll understand a mythical version of science. Like, for example, in debunking flat Earth, probably half of the people you talk to will be like, oh, clearly flat Earth is wrong. And then you ask them to explain it, and they don't really explain it to a rational scientific extent. They just know this knowledge, so it's a myth to them that the Earth is spherical. But they actually can't explain it because they're not at the level where you're capable of really understanding the Earth's rotation and revolution and tilt and everything, and they haven't really made that a responsibility. Difference between myth and rationality doesn't have to be like, I believe in nonsensical thing. It can be, I believe in scientific truth too. It's just that you believe in something. So the mind is looking for these absolute truths now, not just like a myth of the self or some interesting legend, but like what are the stories that like are the stories of mankind and Earth? What is the ultimate hero? What is the ultimate villain? What are we all trying to do here? And that tends towards conformity. It tends towards collectivism, because you realize that, the pursuit of human civilization is much grander and bigger than I am, and I'm just kind of like a cog in this system. I'm a pawn in this game. So this is your concrete, rational mind. It's logical, but it's simplistic. It makes connections where maybe those connections don't need to be made because they just seem rational. Or this is kind of your common sense level. Just like, oh, everybody knows that. Well, why do they? Is it true though? Well, everybody knows
everybody knows it. They don't know why. and it might not be true.
Is it more believing it because you're in that society? It's common
Yeah.
knowledge for the.
It's a conformist thing. It's a membership thing. And you say like, I believe this as an American. I believe this as a Christian. I believe this as a homosexual. I believe this as a black person. You know, you bring up this like identity qualifier because this isn't my information that I'm broadcasting. It's my group. It's this collective identity that I have. As this thing, I say this. So that's definitely like a membership style of move right there. It's not your truth claim is that I belong to a group. It's not like this group is right about everything.
The claim may be. Yeah.
And it's the greatest group ever. That's how you justify it. It's the greatest and biggest and most amazing and well-meaning group. So here in civilization, we go from the axial religions, you know, the years negative 200 or something maybe, or 200, whatever you like, in the West, probably about the same in the East. And people really make these huge nation states, you know, kingdoms upon kingdoms with religious rulership. And this persists through the whole like Middle Ages period, medieval period. And with the Renaissance and all that, that's when we start getting up to orange meme. So orange meme is really obvious today. It's a good chunk of the adult population. And these are sort
college
of
kids,
rational achiever scientists. Yeah. Orange creates these systems that perpetuate orange. They have a separation of church and state. They have checks and balances in the government. They have representative democracy. They have a school system. School system gets you up to amber or orange. It's aiming for orange in general, the public school system. Because we need orange meme adults in this world to perpetuate representative democracy, rational thinking, the sciences. Orange meme's really trying to stay in the game. It comes along with this sort of pragmatic achiever attitude where like, okay, what's the goal of life? Well, I'm reasonable, so I want to optimize. I want to make the most money. I want to have the most attractive partner. I want to have all the cool gadgets, vehicles, home. I want to live everywhere. So Orange is really ambitious in that sense. They see that they have this limitless potential. I can be anyone, the American dream. So a lot of this stuff I'm equating with American values here because they were the kind of firebrand of orange meme. And that leads to corporatism, you know, and massive abuses as well. But huge step forward, orange meme. Still, good chunk of the adults, we get up to green meme. This came out maybe the turn of the 20th century in thought, and then it transformed thinking and got into literary criticism where it festered, exploded into the mainstream with the 1960s civil rights, psychedelic movement. So in Orange, we've become a sort of abstract being because we understand ourselves rationally to be this is not what I think it is. I'm fooled by my emotions and chemicals and tricks. So reality is now abstract. It must be. I think about reality and I learn more about it. Experiencing reality, I just experience more. So we have this huge mind-body kind of Cartesian split with orange meme, and it's really not ever reconciled. We live in an abstraction of a reality from orange up. So green is now looking at that abstraction itself, like this reality we've constructed, these orange meme systems, education, legal systems, society itself, the world itself, and we're saying like, well, is this what we want? Green meme is your postmodern or your existentialist, and they're your cultural critic. And we're turning back, you know, and we're, so this is where you get a little insane. You might push too much with these various like civil righty movements or these kind of social justice movements where maybe the priority is going too deeply into dissecting something, looking for injustice, rather than just like, oh my God, there's injustice everywhere. Do something about the really obvious shit, right? So this is criticisms of green meme today are very common because green meme is kind of nuts right now. But technologically, green meme seems to increase our ability to communicate from phones to TV and radio, you know, like some of that's kind of getting out of the end of orange meme, but it starts moving in this direction toward internet, broadcast, our ability to share immediately with everyone, social media. This is what I see as the green meme tech base. And it's very green meme in that everyone has an equal share in the ability to communicate. It's perfectly fair what you can post. You know, it's cheap. The internet is this insane marketplace of human thoughts and feelings of any type. So all the levels are very well represented here. Whereas in Orange Meme broadcast television, they have standards. You know, they have people like, you can't do that on television, you know. Green Meme is ironic, and it's going to immediately defy that, and it's going to disrupt that and deconstruct that. So whatever you can't put on a TV, Green Meme's going to find a way to put it on something. They're going to show you that thing. So we end up with this kind of Pandora's box with technology where all the preceding levels have been given a megaphone for a platform, and there are no discriminatory criteria. Whatever you want to post on your social media, you can post that as long as it isn't a crime, as long as you're not doing something illegal. In the spirit of the internet, sometimes, you know, the corporate people will you know, they'll put restrictions on what you can share that are deeper than just law, but it's pretty commonplace to be, you know, if you look at like 4chan and Reddit and stuff, you can get pretty off the grid with that stuff. Okay.
So an example of that is something like mainstream media, news outlets are kind of going by the wayside. And you see a lot more people finding independent news outlets now. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a now current shift of the masses going from orange to green.
Absolutely. Yeah, the orange standard of truth has collapsed because people move around it. Like the TV says something I don't want, I go find the thing that says the thing I want. And also the more true thing, it depends on who you are. It's all down to you, you know, and what you choose. So it really empowers us, the public, to choose what we think is true. And that could be really dangerous. I don't want to say good or bad, but definitely risky, dangerous. Because
you get a lot of confirmation bias, that kind of
100%.
stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think my biggest criticism of green meme is cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you feel empowered to be offended on the behalf of someone else.
Yeah.
This doesn't really offend me, but I know it offends Jordan. And so, unbeknownst to Jordan, I'm going to spearhead getting this manager fired.
Oh, yeah.
Who gives it? That's not your business.
Yeah, for him as a representative, of the oppressed. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you're nailing it. Like, there's a lot of unattractive things about this movement that ultimately means to heal the world, you know, fix injustices. But when all you got's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So Green Meme really needs to solidify its connection and leadership and its ability to comprehend lower levels in this system, lower levels, just to even interface with them. Because I think what you're seeing in global politics and in local politics is this gag reflex, this reaction against green meme, the ridiculousness of green meme. And orange, amber, and red are all at war with green. And they're going to win as long as green can't kind of take back its leadership and kind of reclaim its identity as a credible movement. That's probably necessary because green meme is really the first meme that actually cares. Orange meme, to some extent, will always be motivated by the team, the corporate team, or the personal achievement, the my bank account's going up. That's fundamentally what orange meme will always be concerned about. Green meme will start to say, like, well, okay, like I would take hits at the factory to save the environment. And you actually see businesses doing that as green meme comes out. But you need a lot more of it, and you need it to be a lot more confident and a lot less ridiculous. I think maybe baby stages come out a little funny. They come out a little like weak or trying too hard or something like that.
So as we're getting up for orange and green, we're talking pretty modern, even amber. But getting out of red's hundreds of years. Magenta's thousands of years. Infrared's hundreds of thousands. Well, yeah, I believe.
Sure.
I believe. So yeah, it takes it's exponentially going faster, and part of that is the ease of communication,
technology,
tribe to tribe, state to state, country to country. Part of that is that the development of children. The longer it takes you to learn how to walk, the more cognitive you are going to be in real life. If you think about a deer, as soon as it's shit out, it walks right away. It's also dumb as a sack of hammers. Humans can't walk for years because they're working on the brain things. As you go from any node to the next, you don't intentionally look down on the one you just came from, but you kind of have this feeling of less than. when you see someone where you were. And then the next one is public enemy number one. You fucking hate the next one.
You're never really out of any of these stages, though, right? It's
They
just
build.
varying levels of each one.
They build.
Yeah.
You always have orange in you. You always have red in you.
It's just,
but you're getting smarter and know how to control it. You always have the urge. Road rage. Straight red. You can be fucking clear light at the top and someone cuts you. Well, maybe not. You could be teal and someone cuts you off in the street. You feel some kind of way about it, whether you act on it or not. You're still like, oh, that was an injustice, temporary and really only inconveniencing me. That's back to red. You're rational about it.
Yeah.
You're a developer about it, but it's all in you. So we are not a political channel by any means. And if you want to cut this, I recommend it.
Metapolitical.
But you see our orange leader, both physically and line type, canceling green, which is the real way of progress at the moment, by cutting everything. Hates amber. It's because it's less than, and red and magenta. That's the poor. And public enemy number one, sensitive pluralism.
There's individual levels, individual altitudes, and then there's a societal level as well. And overall,
and they're the same.
Yeah. So is there an example of a society that has progressed past orange?
The scale gets bigger too. Like the world is green now.
It's spiral dynamics.
The world itself, you know,
what it was called
green.
Before. And it's spiraling outward, not up. It's just spiraling outward. So infrared's this little tiny, and then clear light's this 1,000 dodecahedron wide.
The lower right graph is what you're talking about.
Oh, we'll get there. That's a little different.
Yeah.
But yes.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. So these occur in all four quadrants,
but for different reasons.
Just to double down on that stuff you were saying, that's really good. The model is transcend and include. Atoms are transcended by molecules, but molecules include atoms, you know, so, and molecules transcend to cells, cells include molecules, so they work together, and the atoms and molecules don't go away with cells, they're part of it. So similar here, like as I develop to green, my cells can still get cancer and I can die. It's unrelated. It's just a thing happening at a very, very low level of my being in the level of cells. And likewise, you know, problems can spring up from your earlier levels, you know, your sense of power or control or sexuality can be threatened, and you'll regress to kind of treat that level because they all continue to exist within you, and you're building on top of them with them being contained into a larger thing. Like you never lose your selfish impulsiveness. You never lose your instinct. Yeah, absolutely. And once you have rationality, you never lose that. Once you have sensitivity, you never lose that. So as we go up, we're just including more and more. We're expanding outward, and we're including more and more instances of the same sorts of items, same sort of data objects.
So is it kind of human nature to think of the next stage as the enemy then?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's the thing I don't want to do. It's the thing I can't do. It's the thing everyone's pressuring me to do, you know, lots of stuff like that. And definitely, you know, if you're entrenched in amber meme, you're going to fight a holy war against that orange meme rationality. And if you're that rational achiever, you're going to fight a holy war against those people that are cutting into your shares with their egalitarian and pro earth health kind of policies. So yeah, each one's fighting a war for its own survival against the next stage and continuing to differentiate itself from the stage before. So all the way up to green, we're in this kind of constant warfare with the stages surrounding us. And this is the world. I mean, green is the world. When you talk about chunks of population above like 2%, 5%, that's the world. It's red, amber, orange, and green. These are the voting adult public. These are the people murdering each other and consuming. This is essentially the adult population of the world. Finally, mainstream ordinary developmentalists recognize stage 7, integral, teal. And this isn't a word, this is a word that Ken Wilber appropriated, integral. It was generally the word that researchers would use to describe the new stage that's kind of coming out in the world now. And what this appears to be, just like green meme, it appreciates that everyone has their different perspective. And these perspectives are informed by cultural values and they're constructed by the mind. But teal recognizes this evolutionary pattern. levels of consciousness, that it goes in a specific sequence and it corresponds across levels of or across lines of development, and that it seems to be universal in the appearance of human individuals and human cultures. With that understanding, you're able to diagnose these problems in the world, these problems in the self, much better, because you just have the clarity of understanding the structures that are informing the way that we think, feel, and do in the world, in terms of cognitive data objects in your mind, or how you perceive reality. We're essentially trying to map out what reality would appear from various states and stages of consciousness, levels and states of consciousness. That's the big contribution of integral theory. That's phase 1 and 2. Moving forward, it's more just a kind of refinement of those ideas and making them more commensurate with other disciplines and other pursuits. In phase 3, we bring in lines of development to suggest that you have multiple intelligences, you have multiple abilities, and there's multiple attributes of you that develop through these levels. So it's not you necessarily, it's parts of you. There's bigger and smaller parts. Like the developmentalist Piaget studied cognitive development in children. Cognitive is pretty central. It's like how capable you are of comprehending. It's like pretty important line of development. And he mapped adults up to about stage 5 because he wasn't concerned with adult development, mostly just how you get to adulthood and how that can go wrong. So cognitive is a really important line. Maybe like musicianship is not an important line. You could get way up there in musicianship and that wouldn't really affect you in other ways. But in terms of your self-sense, your ability to communicate and your cognitive, things like that, those are primary lines. So phase 3 is just lines of development. There's different parts of a person that are measuring at these levels of consciousness. So that one's kind of a more of an academic-y kind of one. Phase 4 brings in quadrants, and this one is much more of interest, and it is much more a contribution of integral. And so we've just taken this basic fact of life, that reality appears to us as a subjective and objective phenomenon. We're clearly aware that some part of this is stuff that I am the one. I am experiencing my feelings and thoughts. And yet there's stuff that I'm not experiencing that's clearly out there. The objective world, something can come out of a different room that I didn't know was there. So there's a world and there's a self in here. And that's subject-object split. So that defines the left and the right. This isn't adding anything. It's just saying, like, we recognize that there's interior and exterior in reality. And a lot of theories of reality don't even factor in consciousness, the fact that I'm in here experiencing right now. But clearly that's the most fundamental thing about reality. That's the only thing that must be true for an experience of reality to be taking place. Another crazy thing that we notice is that everything in reality appears in individuals and groups. There's no individuals without groups. There's no groups without individuals, of course. An apple is an example of an apple. There's tons and tons of apples. The way I think is characteristic of people like me, the way that they think. For any noun, for any, candle, car, rock, there's countless of them, and they're categorizable. So we have this phenomena where nature doesn't just come in individuals, it comes in groups that have individuals. So there's an individual and a collective way of understanding everything. If we look at humanity, I can look at myself, or I can look at the whole thing, all of people, what all of people are doing or have always done. And the system has its own set of rules. It has its own set of mechanics, systems of individuals operating together. Like a tornado doesn't just work like air molecules. It has its own properties. It does this spinny thing, it's forceful, So when things are in groups, they take on new properties, and that becomes a new reality. Individual, collective, subject, object. I probably have my directions backwards. We already do this, but we recognize that reality is split into these 4 different ways of comprehending. And so that's in itself like an accomplishment, because we can now say, like, economics, which quadrant is that in? Psychology, what quadrant is that in? How does this quadrant correspond to this quadrant when we're looking at the same phenomenon? And you'll find people miss one or miss 2 or they're only looking at one quadrant. For a good solution, you want to consider all 4 quadrants at once. Why it was so important to integral is to realize that these levels are expressed in all 4 quadrants. So in the upper left, the levels happen in my life. In the lower left, they happen in our systems of culture, our shared understanding together. Our culture develops that way. Upper right, my behavior and environment, my brain chemistry, the material external individual, my behavior and environment and brain and body chemistry will go through these levels as well. They'll express these levels. And then the group, the collective, lower right, all of humanity, civilization, our technology, that stuff also goes through these levels. So when we talk about levels, we can talk about feelings and thoughts. We can talk about cultural expressions. We can talk about technologies, and we can talk about the way people act. So 4 quadrants of these same levels. It's kind of adds a lot to it too. You can look at social theories like Marxism, and apply that with the same sort of level understanding as you would an individual growing up. It's kind of crazy overlap there. For lines, I go that way. I had talked about lines earlier. Again, it's a pretty academic subject, studying kinesthetic, emotional, cognitive, all these lines of development. So I just simplified it to think, feel, and do. That's just kind of easy. Like, what level do you think at? What level are you valuing or feeling or expressing in terms of what you value? And then what are you actually doing in the world with your behavior? So there's I feel like there's this flow where you think a level first, and then you feel it, and then those feelings cause you to do it in the world. So even if you understand a higher level, you might not actually be bringing it into the world in real life yet.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's an Unthink Me original.
Yeah. Oh. Think, feel, do. Yeah. And then somebody suggests being as well as another. But again, these are just proxies for like actual instruments that are used in psychology. It's just kind of easier to put them into really simple terms. And then finally, Wilbur 5 types. So we're talking about different types of people that have nothing to do with states or levels or lines. So anything that's not captured by this could be types. And one really good example is male-female. So whatever the hell that is, male-female, it manifests in biology, it manifests in culture, it manifests in individuals. So there's clearly something that is male-female. So we're calling that a typology. There's this kind of male way to do things, to develop, to go through levels. And there's a kind of female way to develop, go through levels. And we're not making any claims about like morality or anything. We're just saying there seems to be these tendencies.
Or better or worse. It's just effeminate and masculine ways of doing things, which can be dual in any way. A 6'4" hairy American killing machine still have effeminate attributes. You could be Barbie and still have some masculine attributes. And I use those as examples of extreme. No one's 100% masculine or 100% feminine.
Yeah, it's just
the male-female thing is just the language we use. It's not attacking that there are only 2 genders. Well, there is masculine, there is feminine. There's this unisex thing, but I'm not talking about as a whole. It's again a spectrum.
Yeah, and even if we're wrong about gender, gender is still typing things somehow. I mean, there's no way around gender is causing types to manifest. Like we're not trying to make any moral argument for it. It's just as it's happening.
Previously unmapped.
Those are different types. Yeah, so there could be our types could be wrong, but there's definitely a gender type thing happening or. So as far as types, like it's basically anything not integral where you're looking at different types of consciousness. So you might be familiar with like Myers-Briggs and MBTI testing. It kind of you answers questions and it says you're this type. You're a INTJ. You're introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. Yeah. So those would be a way of kind of looking at the different types of people that might appear at any level, at any state. So anything not captured by this model. So there's lots of different systems like that. And I always like to point out clinical diagnosis as well. Like, are you antisocial personality disorder or are you not? That's a typing system. And that'll have effects on how you can go through levels and states and everything. But Integral is only saying that exists. It's only saying like, yeah, we agree with typing. We agree with like that the first 4 elements don't capture everything about consciousness. And we leave it to the developers of type systems to better refine horizontal, like non-developmental parts of people, like whatever it is to your personality or character or soul that remain, throughout the whole process, hopefully. or perhaps that go through these different characters as the process continues. So hopefully those 5 elements capture enough, it's the best kind of way that we can assess consciousness in terms of like what it's going to perceive, how it's going to comprehend reality. So now instead of making a philosophy of reality that's like monological,
okay. I was going to go the other way.
that's one-dimensional,
as abstract as it could be.
Yeah, like this is not, we're not saying what reality is. We're saying these are all the different ways that people understand reality and why they understand it differently.
Here are some marks and measures and generally agreed upon benchmarks.
Yeah. Perceptions. Common perceptions.
Yeah, perspectives. It's all about different, perspectives. It's a little different than philosophy you would normally deal with, because philosophy kind of tends to come with assumptions about levels, at very least, levels, quadrants, lots of things. But in this, with the integral language, with the integral theory, you can actually identify different philosophies where they show up on this map, and you can kind of compare them across one another, like what level are they looking at, what quadrant are they looking at, what state are they looking at, what are they valuing. So it's a meta philosophy. It's a meta philosophy that kind of transcends whatever field you're in and tries to make connections between whatever field of endeavor you might be involved in. Kind of, as far as I'm concerned, it's the first like fully functional like map of everything, map of reality that can be used as a map of reality, for the purpose of comprehending what this experience is. Because nobody really cared to do that before. This is this is our stage 7 Teal integral. It starts doing this. Not this exact thing, not the Unthink Me thing, not the Ken Wilber thing. It could be the Jordan Peterson thing. It could be a lot of different things. Just looking at the developmental process of ideas, memes, as kind of the structure of reality, as the core patterns of nature, that we're evolving this system of ideas that generates technologies and behaviors, and it defines who we think we are and what we think we're doing.
And the motivations behind it.
After this postmodern malaise, this kind of valuelessness, normlessness, nausea, confusion, this cosmic horror that reality is just kind of this dumpster fire, that what hopefully something like this does is it's a cardinality. It's like, well, if nothing else, if I don't have anything going on at my level or something, there's always this process, this developmental process that I can get involved with in self-culture and nature. I know that if I recognize these levels and I see those levels, I know I should gravitate towards the higher, I should exercise the higher, I should strengthen the lower, build foundation. And it suggests like a new form of leadership that is truly transpersonal, like it goes beyond your own personal desires and interpersonal needs and things, and it goes to like, what would be the best outcome for all of reality? Embrace the greatest depth at the greatest span, the highest levels, the best, the deepest states. Embrace those more fully in any situation.
You reminded me of a joke just now, and it's when you show up to a lake to go fishing or something, and Jordan's like, "Man, that's a lot of water," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's just the top."
Yeah,
that's just the top of it.
So we've now walked through the entire integral map.
Mind is blown.
Mind is blown.
Something to camp on. Watch Unthink Me. Now for Jordan's final thought.
Oh, it's definitely interesting, and I noticed starting from 1 infrared up, I don't know if I'm just putting a pattern where maybe it's not even there, but it seems a lot of like first step infrared is inward, you're looking inward, you're focusing on you, and then it seems every other step it goes back and forth between inward and then looking back, self-reflection, outward.
That's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. The model this is based on is called spiral dynamics, and it's because it's going back and forth between agency and communion. Yeah, internal and external focus. Yeah, absolutely.
Like every next step up, you're looking at a broader picture, or and then so basic needs, you're looking at yourself, food, warmth, and then you're looking outwards, you're trying to explain the world around you, and then once you've established that, you go back.
Conquer it.
Yeah.
It's mine. You go back to yourself, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you look outward, and then you look inward, and then you lo
And then once you've established that level, you're looking back outwards. As a myth member, you're like the collective, and then it's back to selfish again.
Conquer those members. They're
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Self-achiever.
You're going back to personal self, like achieving, rational achiever. How can you make more money? And then green, you're looking back outwards. How can you help the world, basically? And I don't know if it goes up higher than that. The
Yeah.
pattern can. But
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely a thing. Absolutely. Moving between, and it's kind of, it's how we develop is by exploring this extreme and then exploring this extreme, exploring this and this. Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. So, and also hopping the quadrants from individual to collective focuses, individual to collective focus. Yeah.
Nailed it.
those are my thoughts. Final thoughts. It's really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And you can see how, certain character types, if I'm tending towards collectivism, I'm gonna do a lot more activity on that magenta and the amber and the green than every other one. I'm gonna invest more heavily into it. You're gonna see it expressed more. You might see kind of a male and female to these as well, to the levels themselves.
You show me one person that works at Greenpeace that doesn't also have some crystals in their house. I dare you.
Oftentimes magenta is depicted as sort of matriarchal. The great earth mother is often the deity, and often the leadership is sort of it's not just males. And then red is like pure patriarchy. It's like pure male rule. And amber's bureaucracy. It's like men acting more feminine, with their wigs and their pantaloons and everything. Orange is like, again, back to like chauvinism, like it's a man's world kind of thing, industrial types of thinking. And green, again, is very gender fluid, gender open, gender neutral, gender questioning, and expression. It's a pretty feminine kind of attitude. I think it's like an anti-chauvinist attitude, so it comes out as pretty like feminine embracing, feminine celebrating. Yeah. And again, when you get up to that 7 integral Teal stage, it's all about the development of the system and the self. So it's kind of, again, focused inward. It's like the me thing. Like, how can I make my life more integral? This is kind of the self-help junkie personality, or the startup kings, whatever you call those. Really ambitious.
You'll notice in the altitude spectrum there are the 3 tiers. Teal 6.5 to 7 is tier 2. So it's a little different than tier 1. And then tier 3. Tier 3 is basically 100% speculative. We just don't know, but it's theoretical. Here's what probably this goes. And 12 isn't the end. 12 is just as far as been speculated and agreed upon. Could go to
as far as the eye can see.
Know. Yeah.
And so, what that third tier is it's the states of consciousness, psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual, as culture, as stable individual. So it's never happened. We don't know what an enlightened civilization would produce or how it would act, or we can make assumptions about that. And so that's why we have them in the model. But until the world transforms beyond teal turquoise, we won't really know what those will look like as full-on altitude stages of consciousness in all 4 quadrants.
6 back down to 1, able to give you an example of a society that generally was at this level. Above 6, it's really hard, 7 basically, It's really hard to give you an example of a teal society. Maybe like Norway? No. Sweden? No. Something like that. Yeah. But yeah, it's up until 6, we've caught up to the timeline of humans' development.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it doesn't go farther. We just don't really know.
Do you think it's possible for a society to progress further than green?
Oh, yeah.
You think so?
We hope so.
Do you think red thought it was possible that society could go to amber?
We hope so.
What would that look like?
Bend over and I'll show you.
Yeah, what if the planet was bigger? Maybe red could go on longer. It's like once you fill up the planet with people, you kind of have to start doing amber, like, because they're just gonna. Well, I mean, I guess you could just keep stabbing each other forever, indefinitely. Just mega prison planet, just like the whole planet is the great empire.
One giant panopticon.
It just doesn't. It seems like it just doesn't happen that way. There's always a bigger fish. I don't know. Someone out there will dissent. I don't know.
It's a tough. The larger power is gaining exponential power, is a snowball building size and speed. Someone feels objectified and wronged, and then those people will get together, and eventually that will be the majority.
Yeah.
You can only wrong so many people before everyone is at your house burning your things.
It's like each level kind of has a carrying capacity or something like that, where you'll hit that threshold. Like, okay, the kingdom's too big. People are revolting. They want to start their own democratic commonwealth. It's just, I don't know. It's a strange thing. Like, if we really knew the secret of like how to trigger these things, we'd be in business.
It seems like we're figuring it out because they go faster as a society as things go on. So, clear light society, 500 years?
What we're anticipating in Integral is that as more and more people show up and express, the Teal stage will get over a lot of these cultural misunderstandings that are kind of characteristic of the world today. That if you see the levels, you'll kind of stop fighting against how everyone doesn't see the world the same way you do, and work towards like building up the health of whatever crazy thing people happen to be. Whatever they're fixated at whatever level, you can make a system that nurtures that and allows that and enables that to operate as part of like a larger system. But it's like instead we're just kind of like level warfare, like every level's at war with every other level for supremacy, whether it's like military supremacy or like ideological supremacy or influence supremacy. I mean, this is what we've been finding recently is like influence is the currency of our time. Like influence is good for billions of dollars.
What we found in the lab.
We found in the laboratory of love.
I'd be curious to see any society progressing past green.
Yeah.
It will probably happen in your lifetime. You're a young buck.
I hope so.
In history, it's just like you were saying, society advance, they grow, and then they always seem to relapse.
Yeah,
because the majority is the previous level, whatever. It's the majority is the previous. And so what you see today is orange said, hey, amber, red, magenta, we really need to go after green because he's fucking us. And they all got together, and then orange ended up fucking everyone in every direction, which is kind of what it does.
Yeah. There's definitely like a big backlash. And yeah, that's a backsliding. It's like a regression for everyone. To older things, not necessarily worse things, just older things, older structures of governance and thinking. And oftentimes you do that to healthy up those lower levels. So maybe it's a good thing, but I think that's definitely what we're seeing.
The lower levels really learn a lesson in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone that said, I was lied to currently. I don't want to bring politics too far into this, but it's a beautiful social experiment that is going to burn down the lab. But we learned some things.
Yeah. And this revulsion towards green, it's got to end. Like we need better green in the world. We need better green leadership because you can't get past postmodernism without going through it to some extent. So I talk to a lot of people who are like, I'm teal, but I don't relate to green at all. I don't get green. I always have to kind of walk through this process. Like, well, like, do you understand like systems of power? Do you understand how those like create? And they're like, oh yeah, totally. I get that. I just think, all these people saying this is bullshit. Yes, that's green meme. I mean, green meme doesn't have to be ridiculous or extreme postmodernism. It's just sort of recognition of systems of power creating injustice. It's just recognizing how language and context and culture shape our understanding. It doesn't have to be totally nuts. It's just kind of doing that now. But the way up is through that. I mean, there has to be some embrace of those sorts of ideas and not bunkering down in older belief systems that are really clearly recognizable as older. I mean, this is what we're moving towards. It's like, this is how things used to be. Make it great again.
Something an interpersonal communications professor once told me, and it really does apply to this. So you have this 6 foot by 7 foot painting, and it is an involved painting. Okay. Infrared can see dead center 1 square inch of it. Magenta can see 2 square inches. So it's not that magenta can't understand infrared. Magenta just understands a little more and forgets that infrared can only see that 1 square inch. As you go out, you see more and more of the picture. Yeah. You can relate to any of the other ones that can see less than you. You cannot relate to someone who can see more than you, and you have a hard time understanding the border of someone who sees the exact same amount without communication. You see the boats in the lake? Yeah. You see that lake's in the forest? Yeah. You see that forest is on an island? Oh, yeah. You see that island's in the ocean? No. Okay, there we're at. There we are. And I can meet you there all day. Yeah. We can talk about any of the other things.
Yeah, and we might even say that, like, if you only have X amount of resources to allocate to consciousness, perhaps, you know, if you're seeing more of the painting, it might be a little fuzzier. Like maybe that red meme will see that boat really clearly, but you get kind of generally what the picture is. You know, it's kind of like that. It's like you'd have to really work out, if you want to see the whole painting in perfect fine detail, you'd really have to be solid on all your levels.
Yes.
Know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is, because we're not putting down lower levels. We say lower, you know, and that sounds bad, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's
different.
like your fist versus a jackhammer. It's just a different tool. Like there's an appropriate place for each, you know. And those Magenta people, they have an outstanding eye for detail and can get quite good at their, you know, their small amount of local traditional practices. They get quite good at those because there's so few of them to do. Talent and everything. This isn't just like getting better as a person. It's like seeing a bigger piece of or seeing more pieces of the puzzle, and the lower levels are like how well you see them, you know. So you want to be strong in everything that you're aware of, in every level that you're aware of, and you don't want to alienate any of them. That's usually what we do, you know, looking through the levels. There's like, okay, I like this one, I don't like this one. And then you get to a point where they start to become incomprehensible. That's usually where you are. But liking and disliking can kind of occur anywhere, I find. You know, certain ones you like and dislike. You have kind of people who are more and less into the male ones, of course, you know, red and orange. You can be very anti-orange, very pro-orange. You know, it doesn't necessarily even define your preference for these other than the one you're on. That's the you might unconsciously prefer it, but you definitely prefer, you know, your lens. Yeah, post-metaphysics, it's kind of like it's like an entrapping argument too, because like what we're really trying to say is like you can't see other than these levels or these states. You know, you don't. There's nothing else besides these perspectives, and if there is one, we want to put it in the model. If we find more, we want to put them in the model.
And then Wilbur 6 comes out and someone says, "Oh, he's contradicting himself again." Here we go. Here we go.
Kids, if he wants Wilbur 6.
Whining again.
I believe he's frozen some of his sperm, but I don't think there's any Wilbur clones out there to continue the project.
Well, this is another episode of the old Unthink Me channel over here on the YouTubes.
Thanks for letting me be a part of the podcast today.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thanks for coming on.
You can join us on Discord for some nice discussion, or, you know, for the low cost of free, you could hit subscribe, and for the same price, you could ring that friggin' bell. As always, I'm Adam.
I'm James.
Oh, wait, no.
Signing
Nailed it. And Jordan. It's mostly Jordan.
And Jordan. Love you guys. See you next time.
Last week with Neil.
I'll quit the band.
No.
Can we get a time machine and just go back to last week when you had audio? You know, I did try putting Coffee Mate in tea.
Sometimes you just have to re-French.
That was a great idea. Only for evenings, though.
That I hold the cigarette like up there. So feel free to vape.
Okay.
Our viewers
We're trying to get a message out there to those concerned parents that we don't give a fuck about them.
Go on for it. All right.
I am tired of this. I am tired of this.
I'm
not sure how that's immersive, but all right.
Super immersive. Let's try a background that's... No, we are literally paintings on a wall. Quite literally.
So we're like the paintings at Hogwarts?
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Just the two.
Now you guys are green screened?
Two of us.
And partially.
On our side, it's a shitty...
Kitchen?
It's a real shitty, like, hey, AI, make something look like CGI from Blue's Clues.
Ooh.